Hi guys, welcome back. Today we will be having international economics. International economics pertain to the linkage of economic activities of different countries. It may include international trade and international finance. International trade is the exchange of goods, services, and resources across international borders. Exports happen when goods and services are sold to the rest of the world, while imports pertain to goods and services bought from the rest of the world. Now, the question in international trade is, why trade? Why not be an autarky? An autarky, by the way, is a country which practices self-sufficiency and independence. A country who is producing all the goods and services that it needs. So why trade instead of being an autarky? Well, there are actual benefits of trading. We call this the gains of trade. Gains of trade include theories like the absolute advantage. According to the absolute advantage, the country that produces a good or service with the lowest amount of inputs should be the one to produce it. This is espoused by Adam Smith. But what if the country cannot produce anything the cheapest? That is, there's always another country who can produce the good or service cheaper. We have another theory, which is the comparative advantage. According to comparative advantage, the country that produces a good or service with the lowest opportunity cost should be the one to produce it. This is proposed by David Ricardo. To demonstrate both absolute and comparative advantage, let us refer to the following illustration. Sample case: suppose the workforce can produce either mangoes or bananas in the Philippines and Malaysia. Below is a table that indicates how much 1 hour of work can make if it specializes in a particular good. Philippines can produce 60 mangoes per labor hour. Malaysia can produce 70 mangoes per labor hour. Philippines can produce 12 bananas per labor hour, while Malaysia, that's 42 bananas per labor hour. Which country has the absolute advantage? We can look at the input. In this case, the relevant input is only labor hour. The country which has the absolute advantage is one who can produce a lot given the limited resource. For 1 labor hour in the Philippines, 60 mangoes can be produced. That would translate to 0.016 hours per mango. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, 70 mangoes can be produced in 1 hour. That would translate to 0.014 hours per mango. As a result, Malaysia has the absolute advantage in producing mangoes. The key in absolute advantage is to let the country with the lowest amount of input needed to produce it so that everyone can benefit. For bananas, the Philippines can produce 12 per hour, while Malaysia can produce 42 per hour. That would translate to 0.083 hours per banana in the Philippines, but only 0.024 hours per banana in Malaysia. As a result, Malaysia can also produce the bananas the cheapest possible way with the less number of labor hours. From how it is being presented here, it appears that Malaysia should be the one to produce both mangoes and bananas. Or does it? This is where comparative advantage comes in. In comparative advantage, we should look at where the labor hours can be best fitted. Can it be more effective in producing bananas or mangoes? let us consider the opportunity cost of such a labor hour. So when it comes to answering the question, which country has the comparative advantage on producing mangoes and bananas, we will have to look at what would happen if one country would produce a product instead of the other. If the Philippines will produce mangoes, the labor hour to be given to produce bananas will be given to mangoes instead. 60 mangoes to be made rather than 12 bananas. That would mean 5 mangoes to be sacrificed for each banana. Meanwhile, if Malaysia will produce the mangoes, 70 mangoes will be produced for that one labor hour instead of 42 bananas. As such, 1.67 mangoes would be sacrificed for each banana. As a result, Malaysia should be the one to produce the bananas. Why? Because when Malaysia will produce the banana, it will only sacrifice 1.67 mangoes instead of 5 mangoes. What about who will produce the mangoes? If the Philippines will produce the bananas, the labor hours dedicated for production will be used for 12 bananas instead of 60 mangoes. As a result, 0.2 bananas will be sacrificed for each mango. If Malaysia will produce the bananas, 42 bananas will be produced instead of 70 mangoes for that labor hour, giving a 0.6 bananas sacrificed for each mango. At this point, it is clear that the Philippines should be the one to produce mangoes because it will only sacrifice 0.2 bananas rather than 0.6 when Malaysia will do it. So which country has the comparative advantage on producing mangoes and bananas? The Philippines has the comparative advantage in producing mangoes, while Malaysia has the comparative advantage in producing bananas. So this is the reason why countries trade. They trade because of comparative advantage. They are going to sacrifice less for more of the goods that they can produce. But where does comparative advantage come from? According to the HECKSCHER-OHLIN model, a country should export goods requiring the factors of production that that country has in abundance. We call this the factor endowment. This explains why the Philippines export semiconductors and other computer parts to the rest of the world, considering there is an abundance of unskilled labor in the Philippines. This also explains why Qatar exports petroleum chemicals that require crude oil as its input. So according to this theory, a country exports products requiring inputs that are abundant in that country. Next, when we are going to compare exports and imports, we're actually looking at the trade balance. In the trade balance, a trade surplus happens when exports exceed imports. Meanwhile, in a trade deficit, imports exceed exports. Now, some countries, however, want to protect the industries that operate within their borders. As such, they impose barriers to trade. An example of a barrier to trade is tariff. A tariff is a tax or duty to be paid for the trade to happen. We also have a quota. A quota is a limit on the quantity for export or import. Then we also have an embargo, which is a legal prohibition to trade. That is, there should be no trade with a certain country. Or it can be as slight as a voluntary export restraint, which is basically requesting the exporting nation to minimize or reduce the sale of its goods. Otherwise, they are going to impose a quota. Now, there are also harmful things that a country can do as a result of international trade. Such would include dumping. Dumping happens when exporting country sells a good at a price lower than that in the importing country. Considering that we have discussed the gains of trade, it is understandable that international trade would benefit all nations involved. As such, it is important for us to have a means of economic integration, meaning it would be easier for them to trade, such as the reduction or removal of a tariff or a quota. The weakest form of economic integration is the preferential trade agreement. This is a reduction of tariff among countries but not absolute elimination. As I've told you, this is the weakest form of integration. Or, there's a free trade agreement. In a free trade agreement, all barriers of trade are removed or eliminated. One step forward would be customs union. A customs union goes beyond a free trade agreement by including a common external policy when dealing with the rest of the world. That is, if country A and country B would enter into a customs union, they're going to have zero barriers among themselves. And in addition to that, they are going to have same rules and regulations when it comes to exporting and importing with other countries in the rest of the world. More than a customs union is an economic union. An economic union is characterized by no barriers of trade, common external policy, and the free movement of labor and capital within the member countries. The most integrated form would be the monetary union. Monetary union is a group of countries that adopt the same currency. Of course, we know the European Union having the same currency in the Eurozone. So these are the modes of economic integration. Next, we'll have international finance. This is the study of monetary interactions that transpire between two or more countries. An important issue in international finance is the use of different currencies. A foreign exchange rate is the price of one country's currency in units of another country's currency. How is this set? It depends on the international monetary system. The international monetary system would determine how the foreign exchange rates are being set. In one end, we have the fixed system, which lets the government set the price for one currency to another. Very few countries utilize this. And in the other, we have the floating system, where we let the laws of demand and supply to take over when it comes to setting the currency's exchange rate. What regime are we into in the current system? We're more on the floating system, but it is not a pure floating system. It is called a dirty or a managed floating system because from time to time, governments intervene when it comes to setting the exchange rate. But at the end of the day, it will all depend on the demand and supply of such currency. An important concept when it comes to foreign exchange rates is the purchasing power parity, or PPP. Accordingly, the prices of goods and services should equalize between countries over time. We call this the law of one price. Identical goods must sell for the same price when expressed in the same currency. So if we're going to buy one item in this country and another item in another country, if we're going to convert our currency to that currency, it should be able to cost the same. That is what we mean by the law of one price. However, in reality, the law of one price is not always true. The reason, there's transportation costs, and as discussed, there can be tariffs when we are going to buy a good from another country. Some items are not shippable. We call these non-shippable products, as well as services. Considering that they cannot be transported to another country, then definitely purchasing power parity will not hold true anymore. Other reasons include access to information technology and fluctuations in exchange rate. There is also a difference between the nominal and the real exchange rates. A nominal exchange rate would go something like 1 US dollar is equal to 50 pesos, or 1 Philippine peso, that would be 0.02 dollars. But when we talk about the real exchange rates, it is done in reference to the good. For example, if there is a 240 peso shirt in the Philippines and a $5 shirt in the US, considering that the exchange rate is $1 is to 50 pesos, we would say that the shirt price slightly different in the two countries. If we are going to do the calculation, 50 pesos per US dollar multiplied by $5 for every shirt in the US. If we're going to divide this by 240 pesos per shirt in the Philippines, that would mean that 1.04 Philippine shirt would be equal to 1 USA shirt. There is a difference. So these are the issues that we would encounter when it comes to trading as well as conducting business internationally. It is either in international trade or international finance. So that's it for our lecture in International Economics. Like, share, and subscribe.